on the burning of Western forest. And if you saw a fire map, which I'll send you after this exchange, it is shocking. Entire Western North America is speckled with hundreds of fires getting worse by the day. Source of ignition, separate subject. What's setting the template for these fires to burn with such ferocity? Why would they have a motive to do that? We have science study specifically calling for the intentional burning of northern latitude forest to put even more particulate matter in the air to mimic the short-term toxic cooling effect of a volcano. How insane is that, Kim?
Okay. Is it our own government doing this to us? Like California's, blazing on fire. We're seeing hurricanes on the East Coast, tons of flooding in the United States. I understand what you're saying about Dubai, right? Or foreign countries. I can understand, oh, they dropped the dollar. And so we used weather as a weapon. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense is our own nation being attacked with weather, unless it's a foreign government doing it to us.
Well, I think we need to start with the understanding that the government is simply a criminal cabal masquerading as a legitimate government. And again, those controlling the government, our government included, have no vested interest in America anything other than the theater of creating the programming necessary for people to blindly wave their flags. I mean, how many people give a damn about what really happened on 9/11? I mean,
Right.
buildings don't fall down from nothing. Most people don't even know there was a third building in that scenario. They don't even know that. How can
Mhm.
that possibly be? Anybody who searches Building 7 collapse and looks at that, knowing it didn't get hit by anything, should have some serious questions, shouldn't they?
Right,
And
right.
yet it happened. It certainly wasn't a foreign government behind that. So again, we have far too many people, especially in the military, that have been unwilling to step forward. And we do have some that have. I want to express that to your listeners. In our film, The Dimming, we have two U.S. Air Force generals, now retired, allowing them to speak out, acknowledging these programs. We have the former Canadian Minister of Defense acknowledging these programs. We have former U.S. presidential cabinet members acknowledging these programs, government scientists. So again, it cannot be other than that. It is the U.S. DoD in any operations over our country, and let alone what they're doing over other countries. The biggest player in the world is the U.S. DoD by far. Jet tankers, geoengineering jet tankers, military tankers. The U.S. military has 3 times more jet tankers than all other militaries in the world combined.
Hmm.
So, as they're cutting off precipitation from countries in Africa and different regions, because I want to make this clear, it has to rain more on a warming planet. Laws of physics say so, period. 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming. I know this data inside out, upside down, backwards. It must rain more. If it's not, there's a factor we're not being told about. And yes, it's deluging in some places. Again, if you block precipitation from one place, it's going to come down somewhere else in a deluge, and that's what's
Right.
happening. But when you cut precipitation off to countries, you destabilize their food production. Thus, you destabilize the population. The country is much easier to control. Let's take Iran. After 9/11, General Wesley Clark was given a list of countries to be targeted that clearly existed before 9/11 even occurred. One of
Right.
those countries was Iran. All of those countries, by the way, subsequently underwent a once in 1,000 year drought. Statistically, mathematically, that's impossible unless there
Mm.
was a climate intervention operation occurring. And we have the president of Iran on the floor of the UN on film, on the record, stating NATO is cutting off our precipitation. They can see it. They have sophisticated weather monitoring equipment. So again, this is weather warfare, just like Project Poplar. This is historical record. So for Americans to believe that those who actually control their government give a damn about them any more than they do those being oppressed in other countries is a mistake, Kim.
Okay, so this makes sense to me, knowing what we know about the military, knowing what we know about the government. It makes sense to me that it makes sense once you can connect one other dot, and that is there a financial motive behind this? So is there a big, like military industrial
Mhm.
complex? I would imagine that there is, because I'm hearing, I just don't think that the push for climate change agenda would be there so fiercely if there wasn't money to be made. I mean, clearly somebody's got to make some money. So who are the players? Who are the financial players in this?
Okay, you're correct again. There are definitely disaster capitalists throughout this chain, everywhere, From Monsanto, again, one of the elements I named that's being dispersed is aluminum. Aluminum nanoparticles, it's toxic to all life forms, period, no exceptions. So Monsanto's engineering aluminum resistant seeds. Gee, why would they need that now all of a sudden? And we have other corporations throughout this chain that are, yes, behaving as disaster capitalists, much like as I've compared in the past. It's like pirates loading their pockets with loot on the deck of a sinking ship. Not going to matter for much longer, but the bigger objectives are far more dire. And for those that don't know it or won't admit it, and whatever they want to consider the cause of it, the planet is broken at this point. Climate engineering is the single biggest factor to break it, not the only factor. We've been really bad stewards of the planet. There's no rationally denying that. We've been very poor stewards. But climate engineering has, for 80 years, prevented the planet from responding on its own to the damage done. So, for climate, anybody, any environmental group, any climate meeting that doesn't address this first and foremost is a total facade. And that's what
Yeah.
the COP, you know what the COP climate conferences are, right? The international conferences.
No.
Those are the international meetings that happen every year. And now we have oil company executives leading those meetings because this serves them. Again, when they can engineer a snowstorm in New Orleans, you saw that this winter, right? Blizzard warning in
Yeah.
New Orleans, blizzard warning in Florida, Gulf Coast blizzard warning. They can skew public perception as to how badly damaged the planet actually is or isn't. That's what they want people to think. What happened during the same window of time while there was a blizzard warning in New Orleans? It was above freezing and raining throughout the entire polar region in the middle of winter. Alaska,
Yeah.
Greenland, Iceland, Siberia, nobody said a word about that. So again, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're pushing air masses around with these high pressure zones and creating these sensationalized events like the blizzard in New Orleans. Look here, don't look there. But it all comes at the cost of an even more damaged planet. So whatever disaster capitalism is occurring, it's going to be short lived. And we have many in the system that are so arrogant that they think they're going to tech their way out of the damage they're doing with even more tech. That's not going to happen. And at these COP climate conferences, what they're actually doing, Kim, that's not about changing business as usual. It's not about addressing actual damage to the climate. They're certainly not going to admit to climate engineering because those conferences are for this purpose, behind closed doors, to force countries to actively or passively participate in these operations. That's what those conferences are about.
Okay. Well, in my mind, it goes beyond even just like the disaster capitalist, but there would be obviously uh, a financial motive. I mean, somebody has to create this technology, right? Somebody has to create the technology, the products, like you said, Monsanto, right? There's big industry out there creating whatever it is that allows the government to do the geoengineering.
Mm-hmm.
So there's big industry there, and I could see where they would push even a narrative of climate change and say we have this exist. Because when I was a kid growing up, it was the ice age was coming. Um, that's what I was told, and then suddenly it's no. Now the planet's melting, and now we're all now we're all going to burn up. So, and that's just in my lifetime alone. I'm not that old, and so how many things are we going to hear in the next half of my life? I suppose. So there's clearly this narrative that that has been pushed on us. And usually when they push a narrative on us, it's so that they can accomplish a goal. And in this case, if they say climate change, climate change, climate change, these big companies then can get government money, lots of government contracts. If the government says, well, yeah, climate change is now an existential crisis, then and you've got all these liberal, voters saying, yes, we want you to do something about it, do something. And then Congress says, okay, I guess we'll allocate this much money, tons of money, billions of dollars towards combating climate change. So, well, where does that money go? That goes to companies that then are in the business, quote unquote, right, of combating climate change. And these companies then would have and then industry makes industry. And that's the problem with like the military industrial complex is that then you need war all the time in order to stay in business. So these companies would then continue to say, we need climate change. And if they can actually manipulate weather, I mean, same thing with the military industrial complex. They can make war, right? They can figure out ways to trigger war in
And
order to
they
keep
do.
themselves in business. And they do all the time. So
Yes.
the geoengineering guys would do the same thing if they suddenly have a multi-billion-dollar business because the government has labeled climate change an existential crisis. multiple governments, in fact, they can then get these contracts that are just massive. And why wouldn't they want to keep it going? So why wouldn't they then say, oh, well, and by the way, we control the weather. So we can do these events. We can kind of create these events that are totally insane in order to get, and then blame it on climate change. Because that's all we hear, right? All we hear is climate change did this. All these floods in July, climate change. Another example of climate change. So there's people, so what do you say to that, Dane? There's a lot of people out there that are uh, a lot of, well, a couple of things that happen. Two things. The first thing, people are going to point to all of these extreme weather events and say, climate change, Dane, not geoengineering, not some tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. This is climate change. The other group of people, if you said, no, they're actually geoengineering the weather, they're creating rain, they're doing all these things, you're going to have an entire group of people who say, good, I'm glad they're actually doing something about climate change, right? So they're going to say, good, they're combating it. Just like we have people that cheer on war and they say, good, I'm glad we're finally getting rid of that brutal dictator in
Yes.
Libya, right? So what do you say to these groups of people? The first group that says it's climate change and you're just a conspiracy theorist. And then the second group that says, Dane, I don't see the problem here. So what if they are? Good. I'm glad they're doing something about it.
First, I have zero love for the academic left that has behaved with such incredible dishonor by not acknowledging this elephant in the equation that anybody but the clinically blind can see in our skies. So, again, back to the disaster capitalism part. Yes, there are those that are playing that part, but those at the very top, those that are truly behind all this, don't need to profit off anything. They can print whatever they want for whatever they want. They always have. That's how the monetary system works. That's why they're trying to protect the dollars, the global reserve
Yeah.
currency. In regard to the subject of climate, anything, in order to build bridges and not burn them, what I would argue is this. All of us from every side of the fence need to unite on this narrative that we can't have any legitimate discussion about climate, anything from any perspective, without first and foremost addressing this climate engineering elephant in the equation, which is sealing our fate by the day. And for those that don't think it's that dire or that grave, let's look at some statistics right now. And again, I'm not blaming everything on this one issue, because that's what the academic left has been trained. If anybody mentions climate engineering, they deny every other form of damage to the planet. That is not true. Not in the case of geoengineeringwatch.org. We recognize that. We've been horrible stewards of the planet. I mean, how many chemicals have we spread everywhere? We're treating our oceans like a toxic waste dump. We're tearing down forests and paving the planet. Where would we start? But
Right.
climate engineering has prevented the planet from responding to the damage done. And as far as how bad it is right now, today, statistically, mathematically. And for those that think this is alarmism, no, this is hard statistical data. 80 to 90% of Earth's insect populations are gone, terrestrial and aquatic, right now. 80 to 90%. If the insects can't make it, how long do we think we're going to be here? Ozone layer collapse. Remember, you might have heard, Kim, that was blamed on hairspray cans in the late
Yeah, I remember that.
80s.
Aquanet.
There you go. Okay,
Yeah.
now are there bad things in those aerosols? Yes, but again, we're an ant compared to an elephant. Climate engineering is the core causal factor of ozone layer destruction, and it is being wiped out. We're getting UVC on the surface. The notion that the ozone layer is getting better is an absolute total fabrication that anybody with a sense of feel that still functions can feel the intensity of the sun on your skin, on surfaces. We're metering it with a former NASA contract engineer. He recently passed away, but he was probably the world's most or foremost expert on this subject with equipment. We supplied him at geoengineeringwatch.org, state-of-the-art equipment. We're getting UVC on the surface. That's a DNA damaging spectrum. It's killing insects, killing plankton. It's burning the cambium layer off of trees. It's incredibly intense. So that by itself, again, climate engineering and core causal factor, when I say near-term existential threat, we're near functional collapse of the ozone layer right now, based on our readings, about 30% remaining, not 30% gone, 30% remaining. No ozone layer, no food growth. We're done. And plankton, world's foremost oxygen supplier and basis to the food chain of life on Earth, 90% decline in the Atlantic. Peer-reviewed study, 500 locations. These are shockingly dire statistics, and people don't seem to care. As long as they have an iPhone, McDonald's is selling Big Macs, Walmart's open. We're living in an asylum, and people are totally asleep at the wheel. So again, I hope we can all agree that there's no legitimate discussion about climate anything without addressing this first, but we can't rationally deny the degree of damage already done. Wildlife populations globally down 75% in the last 40 years alone. Fisheries are collapsing, crops are collapsing, about 48 countries right now descending into chaos because there's literally not enough to eat. At what point would we rationally, logically become alarmed? So what we're hoping people do is prioritize this issue, help us to push it to the full light of day. If we can wake up our military brothers and sisters, as you so correctly cited, they're not being told you're doing something destructive, you're harming your fellow countrymen. Of course not. But we need to wake them up to the fact that that's exactly what they're doing and their families, so that we
Mhm.
hope they would stand down. That's our hope.
Okay. So what it sounds to me, and this is, I guess this is the rub. It sounds like, I mean, so you're saying, and it makes sense. The chemicals, we're just using all these chemicals, and these chemicals, now just hear me out totally. But it's the chemicals that are causing all of these problems. The chemicals are killing the bugs, they're killing the algae, they're killing probably the coral reef, right? Right. Like all these things are happening. And we're just, because we're just so chemical, we're just poisoning the planet. And so I understand this, that this makes sense why people are saying we don't want chemicals sprayed in the air. We don't want chemicals sprayed on our gardens. You know, there's all these issues. Pesticides, you're putting chemicals in the water. I mean, they put chemicals in our drinking water, all in the name of like, so you don't get cavities, stupid stuff. So they keep
Yeah.
doing these things. But that sounds a lot like actually the same exact argument that's being made by the climate change fear mongers, right? They're saying it's the chemicals. It's the chemicals. We have to stop, lower your carbon footprint. Stop consuming so much. Stop doing XYZ things because these chemicals that are being sprayed and poisoning the earth are causing a dire disaster. And actually, the climate change activists, they're kind of saying the exact same thing, right? I mean, they're literally saying humans are poisoning the planet. And you're actually saying humans are poisoning the planet. It's just, it seems that the disagreement, which actually, when I think about it, there shouldn't be any disagreement at all. It seems like, seems logical to me that we're all, everything that we put into the air, everything that we spray around that's not natural is probably doing some damage. That makes just logical sense to me, no matter whether because you're driving a really dirty car that's spraying crap into the air, or if you're up in the skies spraying crap into the clouds,
Yes.
or poisoning the water. It's all doing the same bad thing. So
Yes.
it seems to me that you're all saying the same thing. Am I? And then the question becomes, then what does government do about it? Because the issue, and I guess like the rub on this is that you're both saying the same thing, but the climate activists are saying, and we want the government to control the people in order to get the people to stop polluting the planet. And you're saying they're using it to control the people, as a mechanism of control. And but so I guess I don't know what the solution is except to control the people, whether it be governments or individuals, and telling people, businesses, companies like Monsanto, to governments that are spraying crap in the air, to individuals even that are maybe just dumping stuff into their down their faucets. I mean, it seems to me like everybody collectively has to stop whatever it is we're doing.
The
But how do you do
complexity.
that without controlling everybody?
Your questions are exactly on target, and that's what makes the corner we now find ourselves in, this dark corner, so difficult to deal with, because it is that complex. It's not just a this or that scenario. It's this and that and everything else. It's all the above. Every form of human activity that negatively affects the planet's life support functions or the energy balance, the former energy balance that's been completely obliterated of the planet, is a part of the problem. And that includes the incineration of 100 million barrels of hydrocarbon a day, 26 million tons of coal. But when you climate engineer on top of that, which none of the environmental community is admitting to, and the Al Gores of the world who fly around in their private jets with no solar and
Right.
collectively burn an incredible amount of hydrocarbon, owning stock in the same companies they claim to be fighting, total criminal hypocrisy.
Right.
But we have, again, clinically insane power structure and hopelessly asleep at the wheel population. That's a recipe for near term planetary omnicide. The statistics I cited cannot be disputed. They're real. We were the first major source to publish the insect collapse in 2012. The climate science community and the environmental community tried to marginalize us for that data. Now they've had to admit to it. Any of your listeners can search insect apocalypse. They'll find verification to what I'm stating.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.